Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here. Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here.
A small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio,
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rebel Force Radio, your source for the Force. We got a lot of Force this week. That's right. We're going to be breaking down the Disney Gallery special that just premiered on Disney Plus this week. Taking a look at Mandalorian Season 3. And as is customary with the way these go, we get one episode. We were really spoiled, with that first Disney Gallery where it's multiple episodes, round tables, and all of that. So it's condensed into one episode like it was with Season 2. We know Bob Iger's cutting those corners, too. He's definitely snipping the budgets, but we've got audio highlights from that special coming up in just a few minutes. Plus, some news. Kathleen Kennedy, of course, she's out promoting Indiana Jones 5, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which opens this weekend as the podcast is released. Many of you, by the time you're listening to our voices, will have seen Dial of Destiny. No spoilers. I have yet to see it. Looking forward to it very much. But anyway, Kathleen Kennedy is out on the promo trail, and she is, of course, talking Star Wars. Why not? She talks Star Wars. And you may have seen this. I don't know. I haven't seen it reported a lot of places, but I think we got a sneak peek of Tim Morrison as Captain Rex. And there are rumors that he's going to appear as Captain Rex in Ahsoka. So we'll be taking a look at that stuff. A little bit of housekeeping, just so you know. We're going to take next week off of Rebel Force Radio. That's right. Next week here in the States is the 4th of July. It's a big deal. Independence Day. It's sort of the apex of summer. So we're going to take the week off. Hope you don't mind. But if you're not, we'll be back on July 12th with more Rebel Force Radio. So please bear with us in our absence. I know it'll be hard. I know it'll be difficult, but we've got so much on YouTube and all the archives. There's episodes that you missed. Go and check them out. And so we've got all kinds of things coming up. And when there's new Star Wars dropping on Disney Plus, that can only mean one thing. This guy has not come out of his studio all day. And by that guy, I mean the one and only, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Rebel Force Radio's back. Yeah, coming at you hotter than a force fire on Endor. It's RFR. I don't know if you've been getting the smoke in the Cleveland area like we have in the Chicago area from forest fires happening up in Canada, but man, it's been pretty wild. Orange skies, smoke, just right on.
Oh, you got the orange skies? We don't have the orange skies. We've got a haze that is.
We got a haze.
We got a nasty haze, and you start getting that burn in the back of your throat. It doesn't bother me. I like to smoke cigars, so I just go out there and go.
Yeah.
And I don't have to worry about smoking a cigar the rest of the day. But
it's there you go. Very efficient. It saves you some money. That's nice. Nice. But it's like I said, hotter than a forest fire on Endor here at Rebel Force Radio each and every week. We got all kind of cool stuff happening. Like Jason said, we're taking next week off. So if you have the Jones for more Star Wars conversation, RFR style, hit us up on Patreon. My God, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. There is so much content there. Just this week alone, we released an episode of the Babu Freaks. We have, which is a bunch of Chicago area Star Wars fans hanging out. We have RFR Q&A featuring the best Star Wars opening sequences from the films, as rated by RFR VIP Ben Stein. Ben Stein is he's a fan favorite. We have RFR Q&A 170, a Clone Wars perspective, what it's like seeing all the Star Wars storytelling through the lens of a Clone Wars fan, the generation that grew up with the Clone Wars. I think that's pretty interesting. And so much more, plus ad-free podcasts, early bird releases, full show video, more podcasts than you can listen to in probably a year or two. We have so much content there, so it's great. Hit us up, Rebel Force Radio on Patreon, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio, and it'll be like we never left. But yeah, we'll be celebrating Independence Day. And, you know, I always try to think, well, what kind of Star Wars crossovers are there with the 4th of July? And I always think of the end of Return of the Jedi when there's fireworks on Endor. And it almost appears as if the fireworks are being launched from X-Wings flying overhead. Don't you get that? Have you always thought that those fireworks were, instead of the torpedoes, they were launching Roman candles?
I will tell you that I've never thought of, but ever since I was a very little kid, in fact, I think my memory of Star Wars predates my memory of fireworks. So the big boomers where they blow up into the ball, probably the most common firework, that always made me think about the Death Star blowing up, especially the original effect. The original effect, the way it appeared in theaters in 77, and even the 83. The Jedi or the original Jedi Death Star explosion was a lot more like the one in 77. Now they've got all kinds of CG and stuff with the
the shock wave.
Yeah, right.
You gotta have the shock wave.
Exactly.
But we normally associate blowing up the Death Star with New Year's here on RFR, but that can be incorporated into the 4th of July festivities if you'd like. And there's a ton of Star Wars branded fireworks out there. I know they're not officially licensed, but whenever I go to the fireworks shop in Indiana or Wisconsin, I can't go to buy fireworks here in Illinois because they're illegal here. So
yeah, they're illegal here too. So I gotta, go to Indiana.
Indiana.
But Star Wars...
And all the fireworks shops are dotted across the board, right there on the border,
Right.
It's like, welcome to Indiana. You see the sign, and then you see, Big Al's fireworks.
But yeah, Star Wars, fireworks appeared in Star Wars for the first time, in at least cinematically, in the special edition, where you see those fireworks shooting off.
At the end of the original Return of the Jedi, when they're on Endor and Yub Nub is happening.
In the original, there were fireworks? I thought the fireworks were added in the special edition.
I'm pretty sure they've always been there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure. Now, of course, it is me after all.
Well, I know well enough not to doubt. In these cases, in the case of Star Wars trivia, I think, especially when it is the differences between the original theatrical versions and ones that came later. My money's on Jimmy Mack. I'll bet against myself on that one. But anyway, so
I'll
Star
have
Wars
it confirmed before the first half hour of this show is over.
Okay.
I'll have it confirmed.
Very good.
Okay. I just want to save people the emailing because
they hate it when we solve our own mysteries in the course of the show because they've got the email ready to send.
Yeah. Because they do it. It's so instant. As soon as they hear our mass confusion, they're sending us the solution as if it's all happening in real time.
Yeah.
But I suggest listening to the entire podcast before firing off any listener feedback. That's a suggestion, though. I don't care how you do it, just as long as you're providing us with feedback.
Hey, speaking of listener feedback.
Oh, wow, a segue. Yeah, Jason. How about that listener feedback?
Play back the entire message.
What message? Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. This is David from Hampshire. I just wanted to call and tell you two things. One of them is a theory, and the other one is a cute story about my daughter at Galaxy's Edge. So the theory, it relates to the Kenobi series and why Reva and the Grand Inquisitor can survive being stabbed in the gut. I think it just boils down to the dark side of the Force. Really, I think we have two major pieces of evidence to support the idea that, your rage fueling the dark side really makes you more resilient. The first one is Darth Maul. He survives being cut in half, long enough to get mechanical legs. The other one is Anakin, who survives long enough after burning alive and having 3 of his limbs cut off for Palpatine to come pick him up. So maybe that'll give Jimmy some closure. Maybe that's a satisfactory answer. Or maybe you've already heard it before, but that's just what came to mind for me. So the other thing was Galaxy's Edge. We've gone a few times in the last few years. My daughter, who's now 7, she was 4 the first time we went. She just loves something very specific about Galaxy's Edge. Jason recently made a comment about the level of detail that was put into the park, and I think the details are great. So much so that one of my daughter's favorite things is a creature, like a swamp creature, that's in a tank of liquid by the bathrooms on the east side of the marketplace. Every time we go, she has to go see the frog creature. And I didn't know what she was talking about at first, but next to the bathrooms, there's a tank of liquid, and there's an eye stalk of some creature that comes out and looks at you, and then it goes away. And this happens every few minutes maybe, but she just has to go see the frog creature, and she just loves it. So I thought you guys might appreciate that. It's kind of funny and cute, so great detail. So thanks for listening, and love the show. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Glad your little Padawan there is enjoying her time at Galaxy's Edge. And next time we're out there, we'll take a look for that little frog creature with the stalk eye.
I can't wait. I can't wait. See, this is how family traditions are forged. She loves the little frog creature, and she's going to pass that down to her daughter, who's going to love that little frog creature. And there's next thing you know, there's going to be just generations of the. Was his name David?
David. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the David family will just have all these generations of frog creature loving grandchildren. So. I think that's great.
All right, but here's what the real meat of the voicemail was. Jimmy Mack has given voice to many, and mine as well. Concern, frustration about sort of the laziness, the convenience of both Reva and the Grand Inquisitor in the Kenobi series surviving this saber to the gut, which we saw kill Qui-Gon Jinn, who was very strong with the light side of the Force, maybe one of the strongest of all the Jedi Masters. It didn't work for him. But David is saying that it's the dark side. It's the quest for vengeance, maybe. The holding on to the grudge, the thing that's going to preserve your life long enough so you can, of course, it'll make you miserable along the way, but maybe long enough to give you that second chance, that next chance. He mentions 2 cases, Jim. He mentions the case of Darth Maul, and the Darth Maul one, that's kind of relatively new. It's part of the Filoni verse, the Darth Maul with the Night Sisters and all of that. But when he mentioned Anakin / Vader, that one kind of brought me over to Dave's side a little bit, because that is a pretty wicked wound. And Vader hung on. Mm-hmm. So what do you think? Is there something to this, the dark side of the Force and that desire for vengeance?
See, I hate to think that there's some sort of bonus in the Star Wars universe for people who are fueled with hatred. I just think that that's a reward. And so I question the whole viability of having that reward present to all the villains in Star Wars. I don't know what kind of message that sends. On the other side of the coin, it could be the other side of the coin, meaning the Jedi, in their abilities to have everlasting life, to be eternal, and live on through the light side of the Force, which is a fresh discovery for them, essentially. It was Qui-Gon who sort of broke through, and then it was Obi-Wan who really perfected the discipline. And so you never really understand how widespread that whole idea becomes, becoming one with the Force, and why I've always questioned the validity of the end of The Rise of Skywalker with all those voices talking to Rey.
Right.
It's like, what, now Kanan, or Kanan, whatever the hell is.
Well, Conan O'Brien is strong with the Force.
Conan the Barbarian, but it struck me as weird that all of these Jedi characters, no matter how obscure they might be, were communicating with Rey from the beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that could be more about Rey than it is about those spirits, but still, I mean, there's got to be some sort of rules here,
Yeah.
Everything just gets flipped around on a whim, and we as a fan base get told just because, and that bugs me. That bugs me a lot, and it's been just because since Darth Maul came back as a giant garbage spider. We were told just because his hatred kept him alive.
Yeah.
Okay, well then how did that body of the spider body of trash happen? Well, just because, he hates, he's angry, he's hatred.
Yeah, and the trash was drawn to him. He clung to life.
That's ridiculous.
Well,
and also with the idea of the Inquisitors being able to get stabbed. Now, the Grand Inquisitor basically explains this after Vader then stabs Reva. The Grand Inquisitor's all of a sudden back. How is this possible? Well, I've heard absurd things about that. He's got 2 stomachs. So what? One stomach can take a saber blow, and what, the other stomach then... I mean, I have 2 lungs. If somebody stuck a lightsaber into my chest and punctured one of my lungs, I'm a dead duck. I don't care if I have another one.
It's true. And I will say this about the communing after the material death with the Jedi. What I didn't like about that dialogue with Yoda at the end of Revenge of the Sith, where he says, I will teach you, basically he says, I will teach you to do this. How to do this, I will teach you, or something. And I always felt that growing up, that it was advanced understanding of some of the core principles of what Yoda was telling Luke on Endor. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. That despite the physical appearance of a corporeal being, what's really there in terms of existence is something far more spiritual, far more permanent. And that false image of the corporeal or physical being drifts away. What's left is what's real, insubstantial. And the more you understand that, the more you can, of course, manifest that. The way Yoda talks about it in Revenge of the Sith is like it's some sort of parlor trick. Like, I'll teach you how to do this. It's cool, Whereas I've believed that it's reliant upon the understanding of the Force by the receiver and the transmitter. I think you need both really powerful Force users on both ends, and we've talked about in the past why that sort of makes sense. How Luke and Ben, I mean, by the time you see Ben Kenobi in Return of the Jedi, he's sitting on a log in a very sort of almost non-ghosty kind of way. Mm-hmm. And that's because his understanding of the Force and Luke's understanding of the Force are really, really high. So I've liked that. I've really liked that. I don't want this to be, as you say, something that any Jedi can do, because then that sort of dilutes it and makes it less profound when it does happen.
However, growing up, we always believed that it was something that any Jedi could do. And so when Qui-Gon Jinn died and they had the funeral pyre for him, we were confused. Well, why didn't he disappear? What's going on here?
We're all looking for his Force ghost. Like, is it in the crowd?
George Lucas screwed this up, man. He's screwing this up. Didn't he know? But there was more to that to be told. And again, it's one of those very vague things, the whole idea of a force spirit and all of that. The most well-defined it ever was in season 6 of the Clone Wars when Yoda goes off on his vision quest. And in that instance, you were sort of getting an idea about it. But it's still, to this day, one of those things that's really left to your own interpretation. I like it that way. I thought for sure George Lucas was going to apply some sort of definition to it in the prequel trilogy, but he didn't even really include any force spirits in that or anything. So, again, that... and now I think that a lot of storytellers are sort of afraid to even touch that. Outside of Dave Filoni, who wants to
they didn't want to go too far, worlds. And some of that, let's be honest, I mean, some of that was sort of geopolitical, and a lot of sort of the self-censoring that went on with the sequel trilogy, I think was a result of them having dollar signs in their eyes and what Asia was going to provide box office wise, China and all of that. And they were trying to get past some of those censors, and it's from what I understand and what I've read, that force ghosts and that sort of thing wasn't something, spirits and spirituality isn't something that's embraced by, not by the people. I don't want to say like the people, but the government and the censors and all of that.
Right. Yeah.
So it could have had something to do with it.
Really interesting. And it's unfortunate because it totally threatens the integrity of the whole franchise, and the saga, and the creators and everyone's being put at risk here. The fan base, everyone, because they remove their eyes from the prize, and the prize is quality storytelling. But it's the business fueling storytelling decisions.
That's what happens when you don't have artists telling stories anymore. You've got corporate bean counters that are maybe not telling the stories, but they're certainly greenlighting the stories in a way that they've never been in a position to do before. At least the old studio barons of old were movie people. They loved movies. They weren't CEOs of huge corporations that had all different product lines and their tentacles and all different types of things. They were a movie studio. That's what they did. I do want to add one thing real quick, because we have a story coming up about Kathleen Kennedy and some comments that she made about the new Rey movie, and it forced me to go back and rewatch just today the scenes in The Rise of Skywalker between Rey and Luke is a Force ghost. Right. And man, oh man, it's been a while since I've watched those scenes, and it takes the whole casual nature of a Force ghost to the next level. If you thought old Ben was comfortable sitting on that log on Dagobah, you haven't seen anything. Like, Luke just follows her around everywhere. It's almost like it was meant to be a scene with a live Luke, but circumstances made it such that it had to be a ghost Luke.
And I don't think we ever see a Force spirit interact with his environment as much as Luke does. He catches the lightsaber when Rey throws it. He's lifting the X-Wing with the Force out of the water. Yes. I mean, even that, as mystical as it is still the spirit interacting with the environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I not that I would think that a Force ghost wasn't capable of that. It's just sort of the casual nature of it, and it goes on for so long that it starts to feel sort of less ghosty and more just like, this is the character of Luke Skywalker hanging out here with Rey.
I like the idea of being able to go back to Act 2 anytime you want to like talk to Luke. It's like, let's just go see the spirit of Luke, but you can only converse with him on Act 2. He's not just going to show up in random places throughout the galaxy. But no, but he does. Because he shows up at the end
up on
of The Rise of Skywalker on Tatooine with Leia. So he does have a hyperdrive.
But maybe it's about, though, because I do believe it has something to do with the receiver and the transmitter, just like in our own world. And so Rey is going to be feeling that connection to Luke most profoundly, especially at that point in the story, on Ahch-To. And then later, after she has accomplished her mission, then she can see Luke anywhere or have that, perhaps that ability anywhere. But anyway, I love the Force Ghost question. I love it. I love talking about it. I love thinking about it. That's my jam. For those of you that love talking about the different trooper armor and the different vehicles in Star Wars, that's your thing. My thing is talking about the spirituality of Star Wars. I dig it.
Rebel Force Radio.
Let's go into this, the Mandalorian Season 3 Disney Gallery. Man, oh man. As I said at the top of the show, Jim, that first one that came out was I think 6-part series, 6-episode for the first season of The Mandalorian. And the format was you had a lot of the creatives literally sitting around the table and discussing things. They were talking about story beats, development of characters. And then the second one we were down to 1 episode, but I remembered, what's that?
They did 2 for the second
season.
They
did do 2. Okay, they did 2.
They did one that covered the whole season minus the finale.
That's right.
And then they released a follow-up.
They came back
and
did the one on Luke. And, of course you can get an hour's worth of great content talking about the return of Luke Skywalker. For season 3, we only get 1 episode, and there were some revelations. There were some good things that came out of it, but I have to tell you, for the most part, I felt that they really played it safe. I thought it was definitely giving a platform for the directors. They really wanted to showcase their directors. I think they stood out more than anything. And then something that I feel is a little problematic is you have a show called The Mandalorian, and you don't have anyone in your documentary that is the Mandalorian. You get Lateef Crowder very quickly. You get a little bit of Brandon Wayne. No Pedro Pascal.
No Pedro. Noticeably absent.
Yeah.
And he's really the only major player from this series that was noticeably absent from this special. I mean, we had a couple of minutes with Jack Black.
Lizzo was in there.
Jack Black, doing the Mandalorian theme. He's doing all that stuff. And what's up with Jack? What's the deal with Jack Black, man? I mean, what is his deal? He's always like spinning around, and then he'll go into like a random like karate stance. And then he does this thing where he puts his hand in front of his face and waves it around a lot. I mean, what is his deal, man? I mean, all right. We'll have some highlights from Jack coming up later in this review.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about Jack is that you can't help but like the guy. I love the guy. I mean, I School of Rock I absolutely love that movie.
School of Rock.
My kids love that movie. It's a great movie. You can sit and watch with your kids. Kids love Jack Black because he's like the ultimate, big kid. The problem that I had with Jack was that he's always Jack Black, right? He's incapable of not being Jack Black. And so he doesn't really translate well or blend in well to, Dustin Hoffman. He's not. He doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't become the character. Yeah. The character becomes Jack Black.
Yeah, he was okay in that King Kong movie. I think he sort of
never saw that
into
one.
a role.
Yeah,
I think he sort of fell into a role with that. But I get what you're saying. You're saying is everything is Jack Black, the same guy who was in School of Rock, basically. High Fidelity. I was sick by the guy. I was sick of the guy by the final scene of High Fidelity. Here we are all these years later still talking about him. I like him. I like Jack Black. I just find his shtick to be a little tiresome sometimes.
I hear you.
All that karate chopping and spinning around. And
Kung Fu Panda, man.
Yeah, he's a little bit of that, but... So his presence in Star Wars is something that, I would understand if somebody said it took me out of it, because
you got to suspend that disbelief, man. Really hard when Jack Black shows
It's hard.
up.
It's hard because it just becomes the Jack Black show.
Right.
And so it's just, in my opinion, one of the biggest missteps Star Wars has ever made, and the biggest threat to the integrity of the franchise is to have Love Boat style casting going on in the Mandalorian, especially that late in the season.
Yeah,
it just seemed nonsensical, and it grinds on me a little bit, But this special is kind of interesting, and what I like about it is that we're hearing from the creatives, we're hearing from some of the cast for the first time since the series is wrapped.
Yeah.
So I think, I guess Star Wars Celebration was there toward the end, wasn't it? Was it wrapped? I think there's still maybe another week or so left to go. I can't remember now.
Well, Favreau was out.
Spring was a blur.
You heard a little bit of Favreau while the show was airing here and there, but no, this is great because they're not worried about spoilers. They put it all out there. I just thought that overall, I would have liked to have and we've got the best of the best here. I know you were combing through every sentence in this special.
Well, it's just the stuff that interests me and things that might reinforce conversations we've had in the past,
Yeah.
That's where I was diving for highlights from this special. So we have a few audio highlights.
Yeah, let's dig in.
When Dave Filoni talks, people listen, and we here at RFR have been listening to Dave Filoni talk for a long time. And he talks about something that we had a lot of questions about, quite honestly, on the show. Bo seeing the Mythosaur. Is that actually what was happening? Was she experiencing a vision? What does it mean to her? And so Filoni provides a little insight into that moment when Bo did meet up face-to-face, eye-to-eye with the Mythosaur.
The Mythosaur moment for her is this moment of faith where she sees something that should be impossible, and she's asked to believe in it. If the creature gets up out of the water and reveals itself, it's just way too obvious. It has to be something isolated, something that only she sees, something that she has to make a choice. Do you trust your eyes? Did I really see that? How is that even possible? Why are all of these things that shouldn't be possible? Why does this Mandalorian Din Djarin believe in all this hokey things that only Mandalorian children were supposed to believe in? But as she watches him have this faith and believe in it, the world around him starts to change, and starts to change for the better. So she starts to change because she thinks maybe this is the way.
Yeah, when I think about the journey of the two characters in season 3, I do see some evolution of Din Djarin's character. I think he fully commits to being the father of Grogu. Not that he wasn't there before, but I think there's a deeper commitment here.
Mm-hmm.
Helped by the Armorer accepting Grogu as part of the covert. But for the most part, his faith remains very, very strong to the point where he does really kind of a radical remedy for his, to atone for his sins of showing his face. He goes on a planet that most people think is radioactive, and the first episode is him really sort of scheming and trying to get there. And yet Bo-Katan is watching all of this and watching, I think, Din manifest this better life for himself. And I think she finally sees that, and that's when she has this vision, whether it's a vision or whether it's literal. I guess so far it doesn't matter in the story, because what it does is it brings her closer to her roots, her culture, her destiny, you might say.
The thing that I took out of that was Filoni confirming that the Mythosaur was a tale really that only children believed, at least as far as Bo-Katan was concerned. She thought it was a fable, a fairy tale that kids believed in. And I think that kind of gives some a little information to us about why they call the coverts the children of the Watch. I don't know if that was a name that was given to them or a name that they applied to themselves, but there it is again, you know. They're looked at as children because they believe in all these nonsensical fairy tales as far as Bo-Katan's concerned. And Bo was Death Watch. So Children of the Watch sound like a spin-off, a religious sect. These guys are just very into their faith. And so Bo shrugs it off and her life is miserable. She sees this guy who believes in the fairy tales and everything, and he seems to be living a fulfilling life, steeped in his faith. Then she has her own moment where her own faith is dormant, but then gets reinforced because she comes eye to eye with the Mythosaur. Does she ever tell Din that she saw the Mythosaur?
No, she doesn't.
Keep that? She tells the armorer. Mm-hmm. And the armorer seems to think it's a vision. Because she says there are many who have had a vision of the Mythosaur.
Right.
But Bo's like, no, I really saw it. Well, I mean, that's what a vision does to you.
Right.
You think you've really seen it.
Right. It's Wile E. Coyote seeing the big pool of water in the middle of the desert, right? It's a vision. It's a mirage. It's you swear by it.
But we as an audience see it too. So does that make it real? Because we're seeing it when she sees it. So we can kind of validate, hey, we saw it too. It's more than a vision. And then I think the most telling is the final shot of the season the final shot of the season on Mandalore, where they take us underwater to where the Mythosaur is, and we see it again.
Yeah. Right.
This time without Bo.
Right.
So are we having a vision? It gets confusing. But I mean, as the audience, I think we're like the God of Star Wars, where we see, we see everything. We're all present. We know everything that's going on. So if we see it as an audience, I think that reinforces the notion that it's a real thing under the water.
I think it's a real thing. And what it probably does is, for us as the audience, is it validates the faith that it's not just based on fables and fairy tales, and that at the heart of mythology, religious mythology, all kinds of mythology, there's a kernel of truth. It has to be based on something. There has to be some sort of, and some would say, a natural event that then is misunderstood by the people at the time, and they create
divine
a story
interaction.
to explain it. What's that?
Divine interaction.
Yeah.
That you can explain.
Right.
So, but again, I think if we're seeing it as the audience, then we're to assume that Mythosaur is the real deal, and it's underwater in the mines.
Agreed. It's still there.
And will we get the payoff of seeing someone ride that thing, as Queel had referred to in the first season? Your ancestors rode the great Mythosaur.
I still miss that little guay. I really do.
Oh, I know.
It's
Nick
2 years. We've had 3 seasons, and I still, every time I see him, I'm like, oh man, I actually have nostalgia for Queel. I have Queel nostalgia.
I binged the comics adaptation from Marvel of season 1, and I had great waves of Queel nostalgia happening as I was reading that comic. Loved the little guy.
Yeah.
And season 2, they've started up with season 2. I was at the comic shop today, and I noticed that it was like a double issue of the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. I think they do a great job with those adaptations. They're all pretty much beat by beat, word for word.
Yeah, they don't throw in extra stuff too much, do they?
No, they really don't.
Yeah.
No, they don't. we're going to be waiting a while, I think, for the season 3 comics adaptation from Marvel. Probably next year. Maybe it'll take them a year to get caught up, which is fine. Doug Chiang. Doug Chiang is one of those legendary Star Wars creatives. He serves as a production designer here on The Mandalorian, of course. He's one of 3 guys still at Lucasfilm who really worked at the feet of George Lucas. Dave Filoni, Doug Chiang, and of course John Knoll. These guys were really tight collaborators with George's over the years with the prequels and the Clone Wars. And so Chiang, I have to pull a highlight from him because I think it's just so damn soothing to listen to this guy talk about Star Wars. I really do. And here he's talking about designing the planet Mandalore, which is something we've only seen in animation previously. And he talks about bringing it to live action.
Mandalore was a really interesting challenge in that we haven't seen a live-action interpretation of that. Dave Filoni obviously created quite a bit of that for the animated series, and our job really was to sort of take that and then translate to live action. George Lucas came up with the idea that the planet itself was devastated, so it's pretty much a virtual desert on the surface. And the inhabitants of Mandalore live in these artificial domes. Inside the domes is this very lush culture. And it was really tricky in terms of balancing, okay, how much destruction versus how much aesthetic taste we want to bring in for Mandalore.
Soothing.
Very
every
soothing,
time you hear him talk
soothing.
about very soothing.
I wanted him to tell me bedtime stories.
I know. I would love
sure.
that. I would love that. I noticed that at his panel at Star Wars Celebration in London, which they streamed. I was like, wow, listen to this guy. He's just, what a soothing delivery he has. And I just like, they referenced George Lucas. It was actually his call that Mandalore was devastated. But I think George had always intended for the planet Mandalore to have been devastated over the years by Civil War fighting happening.
Right, rather than an external threat from above coming in. And that was always the fate of the or at least what I always thought of the Mandalorian people was their warrior ways and how they would, continuously fight with each other. And Bo-Katan says that in season 3 when she's fighting with Axe Woves. She said, we've spilled enough blood, and that they themselves have been responsible largely for their lack of being able to get along and prosper as a society, functional society. Yeah. But I think this environment that they created for Mandalore in season 3 was incredibly ambitious, and I loved it. It totally paid off for me. And hearing Doug talk about this, and then later talking about the tunnels and the caves where Moff Gideon's secret base was, and I don't know why it sort of took watching this behind the scenes where it sort of dawned on me that that's obviously been his base of operations for a long time, for a while, and it certainly wasn't a new thing. And so and I even was taken by him pointing out how the TIE interceptors were, the way they were hanging, they were like bats in the cave and flying. Yeah, it was super cool. Yeah.
That is super cool. And a great visual too when those TIE fighters, they're TIE interceptors, and they launch.
Yeah.
And they just drop down and speed out of there.
Getting into one of those hung like that must be a real bitch. But still, it looks cool. Yeah. It looks great.
How do you get into that thing when it's hanging like that?
When it's hanging like that.
The Empire never made anything easy for their pilots or their soldiers. I mean, yikes.
That's why they fly now.
So speaking of those underground caverns and everything, we learn in this Mando Gallery special that there is an old school Star Wars connection, and that's Phil Tippett. And he worked on that underground environment along with the droid, whatever that spider droid thing that was underground.
that mining droid thing that Bo saves Din from. Yeah. I think it was like a mining droid or something.
For sure. And that torture rack that they had Mando up in. I think that's all like Phil Tippett designs.
They're sucking his guts out or whatever they were. Essence. It's essence of Mando.
It's very consistent, that whole look, with the Phil Tippett stop motion animation horror film Mad God, which Phil put out a couple years ago. It has a very similar vibe to it. And so here's Favreau talking about Phil Tippett's contributions to season 3 of The Mandalorian.
Part of what our memory is of Star Wars from growing up is a lot of it is Phil's aesthetic. Whether it was the Dejeric chessboard with the stop-motion chess characters or the Rancor, Phil Tippett was one of the original collaborators with George Lucas, and we thought that Phil would be great to collaborate with on what Mandalore would look like, to create something that was both tech and nightmarish, because we wanted the Minds of Mandalore to look different from anything else we had in the show. And of course, Phil Tippett's aesthetic was something that we thought we would really benefit from. We actually used his models to do photogrammetry and help build it into the volume and into the CGI.
So they definitely wanted Mandalore, and I think this is some of the limitations of computer-generated graphics and special effects, is that when you want something to, it's great for like things that look fresh and new and clean and vibrant, but when you really want things to look dirty and gritty and grimy, like a back alley, like you need those practical, those mad practical model makers, because it tends to be able to show wear and tear and age, I think, a lot better than, at least now, what I think the computer generated graphics can do.
Well, there's something to be said for that classic way of filmmaking, and Favreau and Filoni, they embrace that old way of making films, and that's how it's looked at, is the old way of doing it. You know, it's far cheaper to create everything with pixels on a computer. But
hell, weren't they making Mando's first ship in their garages?
That was John Knoll.
John Knoll. Right?
John Knoll, he built the motion control rig for the Razor Crest in his garage on weekends.
As one does.
Yeah, right. Takes me like, the whole weekend to hang a picture up on the wall, and this guy's building a motion control rig in his garage. But Phil Tippett, he's one of those guys you want to keep associated with Star Wars. He has this imagination that conjures up very nightmarish images. And so I think you see some of that in the caverns on Mandalore. Of course, this isn't the first time that Phil's worked on the Mandalorian. Do you remember the other time that his work was seen on screen?
I remember talking about it, but specifically I don't remember his contribution.
Well, let me tell you, Jason, I do. And I'll tell you what it was. It was that scene in season 2 of The Mandalorian when Cara Dune went to recruit Miggs Mayfield, and he was, or Mayfeld, whatever, Bill Burr.
What was it, the junk planet or the prison planet? Oh,
he was serving time.
Right.
On this, it was like a lot of like war junk was dumped on this planet, where it was like a TIE fighter parts and everything was just being stripped. So this, I guess it was like some sort of, they had a correction facility there. And, and Miggs was, as part of his prison labor, he was on the
chain gang serving time on this planet.
And so that environment was created by Phil Tippett and his shop. So Phil Tippett. And he's the guy, of course, who famously named Salacious Crumb when they were out drinking, the ILM crew, and they had downed a bunch of pitchers of beer, and they said, "Okay, Phil, come on, I'll walk you to your car." And he said, "Hold on one second, I gotta tie my shoelaces." "Your what?" "My salacious." "Your what?" "Salacious. You gotta tie your
salacious."
My salacious. Hey, we've all been there.
I can see it, right?
We've known
look at the guy here. You can just see him Say it's salacious.
George asked us to come up with a name for the thing, and we went out to lunch, and we had a couple of pitchers of beer, and we were trying to come up with a name, and we couldn't think of it, and we were getting up to go, and my tennis shoes had come undone, and I said, "Hey, wait a minute, guys! Let's stop and wait for a minute while I, under the influence of a couple pints of beer, tie my shoelaces." And we went, "That's a great name for that guy." And so we pitched that to George and told him the story, and he said, "No, it ain't going to be that." And then he came up with salacious, so he turned the shoelacious into salacious.
Just hearing that story, I want to party with Phil Tippett. I'll tell you that right now.
I want him to say salacious to me.
Salacious. Yeah.
You as I'm helping him out of a car.
You want to consume enough so Phil reaches the salacious level. Who knows what else he could mispronounce? He probably has a whole terminology.
What other Star Wars terms could he coin with enough gas in the tank?
Yeah. George probably just sat there with a notepad pouring in beers.
Here's another one. Yeah, Phil.
Salacious.
Ooh-la, that's a good one, too. Ooh-la.
So Phil Tippett, he's awesome, and he worked on Mandalorian Season 3. Dave Filoni, more cuts from Filoni. Now, this is kind of a turning the clock back a little. We get in Filoni's head, and he candidly discusses some early reservations he had about the idea of a baby Yoda in the show.
What puts a measure on your story is how creative can you be. We try to give the audience something that they've never seen before. Like in season 1, Jon wants to make a baby Yoda. I'm like, what? Why? Why would we do this? That sounds like not a good idea. But you put that initial fear aside and you say, okay, well, let's really examine this. And I was like, Jon, if you're going to do this, I'm going to be there with you, because I know Yoda's one of George's favorite characters, and we cannot mess this up. But, I also knew Jon a bit as a filmmaker, and I know he's got a great heart and a great sensibility for telling stories that are meaningful to people, and that maybe this little child could turn out to be something special. But we didn't even think it was going to be a puppet the whole time. We thought it'd be CG. Jon's coming off of making Lion King and Jungle Book, where the CG is practically unparalleled with its believability, and here it is. We got Werner Herzog telling us, no, believe in the puppet. And, the world did.
That's a T-shirt. Believe in the puppet.
As soon as he said that, of course, that's all I'm hearing in my head. The puppet, in the puppet, you must believe.
Bring the puppet to me. So that's funny, though. I think it's interesting to hear that Dave had a little bit of a hang up. You could imagine, just hearing the pitch alone, as someone, like Filoni, who'd been at Lucasfilm for about a decade by the time they started, even longer than that, by the time they started up with The Mandalorian. And then you have Jon Favreau coming in, who did not sit at the feet of George Lucas, and he wants to take. He wants to do something very interesting with one of the most famous characters of Star Wars history, but not the character itself, Right. But still, the comparisons are always going to be there. And for the longest time,
George was. Wouldn't you say that George was somewhat cavalier by throwing in Yaddle in Episode 1?
What's up with that?
Yeah, because
what's that all about?
Filoni's talking about how special Yoda is and his species. There's so much mystery and all of that. So it still surprises me to this day that we saw another of Yoda's species. I don't mind it, but it's very surprising. And so when Favreau's like, yeah, wasn't there another one? There was another one. It wasn't just Yoda. There was that one in Episode 1. You saw her bouncing around there at the end. So But yes, the fact remains that Yoda's backstory has been kept secret on purpose. George didn't even name his planet in front of a convention full of people like he did Obi-Wan's home planet. Remember the whole Stu John thing?
Yeah.
Even Jon Stewart, who it was named after, was disappointed. He's like, "Oh, don't make it up now. I want the vision that you spend, that you agonize over these things, that they're not just anagrams of people's names." But
of talk show hosts. That's weird.
He was almost disappointed that he named it after him. Like, I'm not even, come on, that ruins it for me. But anyway, yes, so Yoda is obviously a huge mystery in the world of Star Wars, and having another one, a baby. And I think Dave was also, I don't think he brings it out much in this clip, but I think he was also perhaps distracted or concerned by people misunderstanding who the character is and thinking it is Yoda. And yeah,
I bet Filoni had a few sleepless nights thinking about Baby Yoda after first learning of the concept. I could see Dave tossing and turning in bed.
It could have gone horribly wrong. It really could have gone horribly wrong.
Because there was a precious element to Yoda and the mystery of Yoda, and which is here's a good example of Lucasfilm protecting the Yoda image. Is in 1993, I want to say, Topps had a trading card set called Star Wars Galaxy, and it was artist illustrations of moments from within the films, or even things happening off screen, or just different takes. Like a helmetless Boba Fett appeared on one of these cards. So it was really interesting and creative artist interpretations. One of the cards that was proposed for the set but never got produced because Lucasfilm shut it down was a handful of people from Yoda's species. So like 4 or 5 Yodas, and they're in a temple of some sort. And one of the shaman of the Yodas is standing there with his arms up in the air, with his back toward us, but he's facing this giant Yoda Buddha statue. It's like a big, giant, fat Yoda, and it's a statue. And so it appears like they're all worshiping this Yoda species Buddha. And so Lucasfilm got a glimpse of this, and they're like, no way, man. We're not going to. Hey, look it up. It's called probably Unproduced Star Wars Galaxy Yoda card. Maybe you'll find the image. But it was this Buddha Yoda. And Lucasfilm got a look at that, and they're like, no. This is not going to be part of the card set. Somehow the image leaked over the years. And fans like me got to see it. Oh, Jason found it. There's the image right there.
Yeah, I don't remember
the Yoda
seeing
shaman, and he's worshiping a Buddha Yoda.
And the Yoda shaman is sort of illuminated. He's got like a bluish, glowy outline, as though he's receiving some spiritual force, I guess we could say, from the idol of the Yoda. So this was a bridge too far, according to Lucasfilm.
Yes.
They just didn't.
They probably showed it to George. George himself probably said, no.
That's not how it happened.
No, this is not how it works. No. And you see there's other Yoda species there.
Yeah.
Sitting there like kind of as part of the congregation. You got 4 or 5 of them there. And then they're all
look at them. They all look just like Yoda. There's not a lot of variation from what I can tell.
No, they could be clones.
Yeah.
And then the shaman is there, and he's kind of glowing, and they're worshiping a big Buddha Yoda. So I love that. And with that amount of protection going on, So like, oh my God, you can't even make a trading card illustration that would violate the mystery of Yoda. You're not allowed to do that.
The sanctity.
And then we get introduced to the Jedi Council chambers, and everyone's like going, what the hell is, it looked like maybe the little frog that David's daughter loved so much at Galaxy's Edge. It was Yaddle, the weird Yaddle. And Yaddle was supposed to have a line in the film, and it got cut out. They were debating something, and Yaddle stopped the whole conversation. Everybody silenced to hear what she had to say. I can't remember exactly what it was she had to say about the
was it
return
in
of the
Yoda ease? Was it the backwards
I think it was
way
just
of
one
talking?
word. I think it was one word she said. I can't recall. I'd have to look that one up. But I'm pretty sure it was filmed and just eventually cut out of the Jedi Council scenes. Yeah, they didn't want everyone piping in. It turned into a big debate or something there in the Jedi Council. Lucas wanted to keep the story clean. And but Yaddle.
But it's interesting. I mean, here we are all the way into a documentary about season 3 of The Mandalorian. Grogu, Baby Yoda is perhaps the biggest thing to happen in Star Wars as far as a single character, and since Darth Vader, maybe in terms of being
at least
iconic
in the Disney era.
For
there is
sure.
no character that's more popular than Baby Yoda.
Not at all. Not even close. And Dave is still talking about what a risk it was. So that should tell you something, that's still on Dave's mind every time he sits down to talk about The Mandalorian.
Yeah, the whole I can't believe this actually worked sort of revelation. He's still having to this day.
Right.
And let's face it.
Worked.
Let's face it, by the time George Lucas himself retired, he still didn't know what the hell hit him, He still is probably like, how did that happen? It's still just like a freight train running through his life. And Filoni might be feeling similar about the success of Baby Yoda. Yeah. So Baby Yoda lives on. And the world did respond to Baby Yoda in a big way. And I like how the creatives are so comfortable now calling Grogu Baby Yoda. I'm good with that. I just didn't like the child. It was so just generic and lame sounding. And it's like the people who are calling Baby Yoda the child are the same people who call the Emperor Sheev. And so, I mean, there's a thing going on with fandom sometimes that I don't understand, and I don't even try to. But I just don't like to drink corporate Kool-Aid all the time. So you'll hear me revolt. And it's getting harder and harder, as we were talking earlier about geopolitical Star Wars. That's a slippery slope.
Right.
The integrity of the whole thing is at odds. One of the best things to pop up out of The Mandalorian Season 3. Oh, before we go on forward, yes, I did confirm the fireworks were in the original print of Return of the Jedi.
In the original.
Those fireworks go all the way back to 1983. Happy 4th of July. Ahmed Best, what a great surprise it was to see Ahmed appear in The Mandalorian Season 3, reprising his game show host role from Star Wars. I forgot the name of the series.
Oh, God, what was it?
Jedi
Challenge? Was it the Jedi
Challenge? Yes. The very Disney-fied Star Wars kiddie game show that seemed to me to be entirely scripted. But, fun for someone. And Ahmed was there as the host, as this Kelleran Beck character. And now he's received the full canon treatment, and he's been introduced into The Mandalorian as the Jedi who saved Grogu from Order 66. Insane. So Filoni, Favreau, and then we're going to hear from Filoni, we'll hear from Favreau, and then we'll hear from Ahmed Best himself, all in this one clip about what it was like to provide a little bit of redemption to Ahmed and his career in Star Wars.
We knew we had to tell more stories because we've told flashbacks about what happened to Grogu.
and how Grogu escaped the Jedi Temple. We've shown little glimpses and clips of his memory, most recently in the Book of Boba Fett. And so we wanted to continue to tell that story in small chapters. And so we had to figure out, okay, what's the next chapter? What's a likely thing that would have happened?
Get the youngling to Kelleran, go!
What was clear was we needed Grogu to have a type of savior companion that preceded Mando, and that it would be a Jedi. And then it becomes important to say, well, who is that? Because that'll be a big deal. And for me, it's always nice when it's somebody, quote unquote, in the family here at Lucasfilm, someone that's, been out there representing Star Wars, interacting with fans, carrying the banner. And, Ahmed Best has been such an important part of our Star Wars history.
He introduced the character of Kelleran Beck, a Jedi, into Star Wars, and we thought that this could present a really cool opportunity to incorporate him into The Mandalorian.
It hasn't really hit me yet. I never thought I'd be back, to be honest, especially like this, so it's crazy.
Yeah, crazy for all of us.
It's cool. It's
but
crazy cool.
He's played now 3 characters in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Kelleran Beck, Jar Jar Binks, and the guy that was in the Outlander Club in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I can't think of his name.
Ahmed Mech.
He's got an action figure, doesn't he?
Of course he does. That's how I know
he's got an action figure. Okay.
Yes, he does. How about a Kelleran Beck action figure, for crying out loud? That's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. And for those of you who maybe didn't make it all the way to the end of last week's show, it is not Ahmed Best that we see at the end of The Phantom Menace when Palpatine approaches Anakin and says, "I'll watch your career with great interest." A lot of people think that's Ahmed Best in Jedi gear.
It is
right
not.
over Palpatine's shoulder, but it's not him. It's a guy we call here at Rebel Force Radio Fake Mace. Fake Mace. And I tried to do some research into Fake Mace. I'm like, I think this was the same day they were doing the pickup shoots with Steve Sansweet. So I reached out to Steve, and Steve knows nothing about Fake Mace. He goes, "Oh no, track down Dan Manson." I'm like, "Oh yeah, Dan was there. He was with the beast of burden there, and he was
Dam's
handling
Dana.
Dam's Dana, and damn, Dana didn't know anything." So I don't know. There's a guy who worked at ILM called Jon Coppinger, and he's one of the original sculptors of Jabba the Hutt. And he was in that scene actually playing Ki-Adi-Mundi, who is normally played by Silas Carson. Right?
Yes.
And
right.
Yeah, right. But so, I mean, there was more than one stand-in there that day. But I only care about Fake Mace. Because with Ki-Adi-Mundi, you got the cone head on and the facial hair and stuff. You could have anybody playing that. I don't care.
Right.
But if you're trying to present this random guy as Samuel L. Jackson, then we got to talk about that. We got to talk about it because he's clearly like right in our vision. And a lot of fans are looking at the Phantom Menace these days with the vision of Kelleran Beck in their head, and they think they're spotting Ahmed Best in the Phantom Menace as this character in Jedi robes. And that's not the case. I think it was Samuel L. Jackson's stand-in who, may have been, like, maybe they intended to CGI Sam's
George,
face over
that's
this
when
guy.
George was doing the whole thing. Well, I could take the eyes from this take and the mouth from that take and do a composite and make the perfect take.
Yeah.
He thought he could do that. I don't know that there's any evidence of him doing it, but I distinctly remember him talking about being able to do that in various interviews.
And they just forgot. He forgot he shot this scene. He's like, "Oh, that's not Sam Jackson. He's probably too late now." He's one of those guys.
Right.
And George Lucas is that type of guy. He's like unflappable in that way. And I just saw somebody ripping on George Lucas. Who was it? Frank Darabont, the guy who wrote The Walking Dead. He's done a bunch of stuff. Shawshank Redemption. Frank Darabont.
Why is he crapping all over George Lucas?
Because of Indiana Jones. Frank wrote the first script with Spielberg for The Crystal Skull. And Spielberg loved it. And that was the script that Steven wanted to shoot. But it was George who shot it down. If you remember correctly,
George wanted to go with the alien stuff.
He wanted to go with the aliens. And so Frank apparently flat out told George Lucas, you're making a huge mistake. You're throwing away a great script. What's the matter with you? And George is just like, nope, sorry. It's going to be my way. It just like couldn't budge him. Couldn't even budge him. And so I thought that was interesting to hear a Hollywood guy talk about George Lucas in such a candid fashion.
We heard stories, Jim, about how George would be with some of the LucasArts teams with that 1313 game that was in development, and he would come in and he would have meetings and he would just change everything. Just say, no, that character is going to be this guy, and that's the way it is. And these poor people were spending weeks, months, sometimes in between George visits, creating these scenes and these stories and characters, and then George would come in and say, no, it's going to be Boba Fett. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
He's going to be Boba Fett? How's it going to be Boba Fett?
I mean, I think with 1313, they were even like to a point where they were starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and George basically put them back to square one. The way it came off was like almost on a whim.
Right.
I want the lead guy to be Boba Fett. They're like, well, wait a second now. We shot all this stuff and make him Boba Fett. Like they could just put a Boba Fett skin over the protagonist of this video game. And yikes. So I found the Frank Darabont story. This is Frank explaining what happened with the script. He just said, I spent a year of very determined effort on something I was very excited about, working very closely with Steven Spielberg and coming up with a result I and he felt was terrific. He wanted to direct it as his next movie, and then suddenly the whole thing goes down in flames because George Lucas doesn't like the script. Now, here's the stuff I like. I told him he was crazy. I said, you have a fantastic script. I think you're insane, George. You can say things like that to George, and he doesn't even blink. He's one of the most stubborn men I've ever known. You're crazy. That's what you think.
You think you're the first guy that's told me that?
Sticks and stones. But
George has been called worse than that by bigger men than this guy. I personally, I didn't love the alien stuff. I always thought Indy was better when he kind of served a more mainstream sort of religious mythology. The two best films were.
I mean, there was always fantastical stuff happening in the Indiana Jones thing, but I mean, this whole other dimension and aliens and the flying saucer that's underground and all. I mean, it was madness. And so a guy like Frank Darabont, he sees the fan reaction and the critical reaction to Indy 4 being a little harsh. And that only validates the fact that he thinks that he would have created the successful Indy 4 had his script gotten the green light. And he wants to release the script and let everyone know what the story was, but he won't. He doesn't care about George, but he doesn't want to damage his relationship with Steven Spielberg.
Okay.
So Frank's going to hold on to that.
Well, because Spielberg is still active, and George is not.
Well, that's
in Hollywood.
That is true. But so I think eventually someday we'll get our hands on that script from Frank. Just the mere fact that he's teasing he could release it.
Right.
Sort of tells me he does. I mean, maybe he was just putting that out as a feeler. Maybe he'll hear back from Spielberg saying, go ahead. Why don't you put that out there? Or Spielberg, valuing his relationship with Lucas, will say, no, don't do it. So,
Spielberg was not caught, but I mean, he's on video and in various interviews talking about the fact that, it's well known that George was very stubborn during the development of that film and that he essentially agreed to direct the final version of the script as because of his friendship with George. I don't think
And I think because of his friendship with George, he stepped away from Indy 5.
Right.
Leaving the door open for James Mangold.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was his friendship with George Lucas that made him step away. So, if George isn't going to be working on this, then I'm not going to be working on it.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was a response to the fact that Lucasfilm and Disney threw out George's treatments for the sequel trilogy. Who knows what it is? I mean,
we'll never
grudges
know.
Do exist in Hollywood.
Yes,
Grudges
we'll
do exist.
Right, and we'll never know who. We do know that the idea of Raiders of the Lost Ark was developed during that famous vacation that George took in Hawaii with Spielberg after Star Wars came out. They were both huge James Bond fans. They loved the whole James Bond vibe. They sort of mixed the Bond adventure with the archaeology and the history. The history stuff came from George. George is a history buff. He loves that stuff. But it'd be really hard to pull apart what parts of Indy was George and what parts was Spielberg. It's fascinating. I don't know who really lays claim to the character. I think they both share him, at least publicly.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Indy 5.
I am too.
I don't care who's directing it. I'm just happy Harrison Ford is back, and the preview clips I've seen look really good. Like Jason said, by the time you guys are hearing this show, I probably will have already seen the film, and most of you have already. So we'll discuss it when we get back after our 4th of July break. We'll talk about that film, and we'll share our opinions on it, because I think it's an important film for us Star Wars fans to look at outside of the obvious connection, the Lucasfilm connection, the Harrison Ford connection, stories and characters based on those created by George Lucas and everything. I mean, we've said that Indy is the kissing cousin of Star Wars, essentially. But I'm still not going to devote entire shows to it, because we know that you guys come to us to hear Star Wars talk, and that's what we're going to stick with. But it's an important movie to look at, I think, number one, because of the deep fake stuff, which I think will eventually make its way to Star Wars in a more profound way than it already has. And also the James Mangold factor. We know that he's lined up to create a Dawn of the Jedi or Dawn of the Force type of movie for Lucasfilm. So I think there's a lot riding on this Indiana Jones thing. But most importantly, I want to see Harrison Ford have a proper send-off to the character, and in a way where the character is sent off with a sense of dignity, and it acknowledges our nostalgia and love of the character. And nobody else can play Indiana Jones than Harrison Ford. Nobody.
Yeah. No, I agree. They've tried it. I think River Phoenix came close to, as far as, that time in his life. I think River really captured that sort of suave yet bumbling sort of aspect that Indy has. He makes clumsy, look good in some ways. I just saw a clip of Harrison talking about, while we're talking about Indiana Jones, talking about Sean Connery. He was asked about Sean Connery. And I don't recall hearing Harrison talking about Sean since he's passed. So he talked about when they first met, and they were going over details and making all the final arrangements to make the movie, and they were staying at the same hotel, and Sean asked him to play tennis. And Harrison was talking about how he hadn't played tennis. He played like one time. And Sean's like, "Oh, come on, we'll play tennis." One of these resort hotels. And so Harrison was up to serve first. They were playing doubles, and it was Harrison and Sean Connery on the same team. And he just kept binging Sean in the back of the head with each serve until Connery just said, yeah, maybe this isn't your game, boy. So,
maybe next time we should try pickleball. Okay. Pickleball wasn't around back then. All right. We got more from the gallery, but it was great seeing Ahmed Best back. And Kevin Lyle will be on stage at Contropolis in New Jersey, July 8th through 9th. He'll be hosting the Ahmed Best panel. So you can hear Kevin talk to Ahmed Best, and maybe there'll be a Q&A there where you can ask your own questions too. If you have want more information about that, visit contropolisnj.com for more information. So good for you, Kevin. All right, we were talking about the integrity of Star Wars being threatened by many factors at play here, whether it be clueless executives, whether it be geopolitical motivations, or a menagerie of different distractions and influences coming into play. But I think the most obvious and vile of these integrity violations came with the inclusion of Jack Black and Lizzo in The Mandalorian Season 3.
The most existential threat that Star Wars has faced in its near 50 years is Jack Black and Lizzo.
So naturally, I want to know more.
I don't disagree. That's for sure.
Move aside, Jake Skywalker. Jack Black and Lizzo are in town.
Hold my beer.
Moved into a galaxy far, far away. I don't want to overblow this or anything, but I want to know more. I want to learn more about this. I want to try to understand what the hell was going on here. So let's just go right to Jack Black himself as he is babbling sometimes nonsensically to the documentary crew here, covering his fitting as his wardrobe fitting for the Bombardier character that he played in Mando Season 3. Take it away, Jack.
Jon Favreau claims that he wrote this role for me.
I think he did.
I love the name Bombardier. I like to think that I'm a badass, that I actually could hold my own in battle. There's no talk of that. In the script, it just says that I used to be a facilities planning officer.
No.
Is Bombardier a dancer?
I think so.
Dude, his name is Bombardier. It's got bomb in the name.
Yeah, like
How could he just be a facilities planner? He's got a blaster. You just don't see it. Who wouldn't want to party with Bombardier? Everyone wants to party with Bombardier. I'm going to have to do a quick research study on all dancing that's ever taken place in any Star Wars film or side series.
Snap here.
Because I definitely feel like I need to have the moves.
Like, what's the matter with this guy?
That poor dresser is trying to get him to pay attention.
Yeah,
just trying to
he's
fit him into
dancing,
his
spinning
costume.
around, jumping into kung fu stances randomly.
Partier with Bombardier is what Jack is on. Jack is
so that's
all
what
about.
Jack's bringing to the table, dance moves. No, you know what? Ula was more than enough. We don't need Jack Black skipping around the Star Wars universe doing what he says is dancing. I did the air quotes there, so dancing.
I think the first Star Wars dancing is with the modal nodes as they were, with the sax, and they were kind of doing a little dance.
They're grooving. They're grooving.
Yeah, they're grooving.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't see any more dancing until Return of the Jedi. And we see a lot of dancing, like you said, Ula. We see various Jabba's denizens, the six-boobed woman.
Oh, yes, Gargan.
Yarna, Dal Gargan.
Yeah.
And so it was really Return of the Jedi that made dancing a thing. I can't remember if there was dancing in the holiday special. So if Jack wants to do his research, he's going to have to probably start there.
I don't think they were dancing in the prequels.
No, they really weren't dancing. And I was trying to think about the big ceremony at the end. Na, 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 na. There was no dancing.
No, nobody's dancing. There's no dancing.
No, there's no dancing.
I think Dam's Dana was doing a little.
Yeah,
he was twerking. I think a little there.
I think Anakin and Padme were doing a little mattress dancing in between films.
Now. Hey now, I mean, Luke and Leia just didn't show up out of nowhere.
That's right.
Your source for the Force.
Dave Filoni.
Mm-hmm.
So we there's always room for cuteness in Star Wars to a degree. I remember when George was shooting the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, and he was there overseeing all of that stuff. And he looked at the camera, a documentary crew, and he's like, yep, dare to be cute. Dare to be cute.
Dare to be cute.
And I mean, that hits with some fans, and other fans it doesn't land at all. I particularly don't care for cutesy Star Wars. I don't collect Funko Pops, which I consider are cutesy. Little stuffed animals and little wacky caricatures and stuff like that. I like the more screen accurate stuff as a collector. And as a fan, I prefer a little bit of grit to the storytelling. And sometimes the cuteness will definitely detract from the grit. Jar Jar Binks was cutesy at times. He detracted from the grit. I don't know. But also there is room for whimsicality in Star Wars, too, when you think about the Max Rebo band performing in Jabba's palace. Well, there is whimsical stuff going on. And Dave Filoni talks a little bit about it, and he talks about why some of this stuff has its place in Star Wars. And it's all a matter of perspective. And he brings up one thing in particular that's whimsical that happened in season 3.
In Star Wars, you want a feeling of hope, a feeling of adventure, but more so uplifting positivity to be happening. I think we need a range of stories and experiences in Star Wars that go from being cute and fun to being serious and dark. You knew in the old movies when Darth Vader showed up, it was time to get serious. But you knew when it was fun, and you see the Jawas or the Ewoks, and it was a little more lighthearted. But you also knew that those lighthearted things that seemed fun and simple might pay off later in a big way, that it might be meaningful. The smallest lives, the most insignificant people can sometimes rise up and do the greatest things. If you want to see Baby Yoda walking around in a metal body like exoskeleton power suit like Ripley in Aliens, we've got that.
Yes.
I thought it was a really fun idea. I mean, I never try to lose touch with the kid that saw Star Wars that I was and think, boy, I would have loved that.
Okay. Yoda in the exosuit, in the IG suit I loved it. I thought it was great. I didn't think it was cutesy, actually. I thought it was funny.
It was whimsical.
It was whimsical.
With the yes, no, yes. That's whimsical. He squeezed the fruit. He squeezed the fruit. That was whimsical.
Yeah.
Give me any fruit squeezing. I will cry whimsicality.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Here's the challenge. Is when Dave talks about, when Darth Vader shows up on screen, it's time. Okay, sit back in your seats. It's getting serious now. This is the challenge when you're dealing with Star Wars as a TV series, whether it be the Clone Wars or Rebels or Mandalorian. You spend a whole episode being cute, right? That's the challenge. Is that at least in the films, You're looking at 2 hours and 10 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes, whatever it is. And you know that the cuteness is going to be a couple of minutes, and then you're going to get back to, as Mac was saying earlier, a little bit more of the grit. The television format, or that serial format that we have with the streaming series, gives them maybe too much time to sit in that pocket of cuteness. It's a little long, maybe. So I think that's the challenge. Now, what made the IG suit work so well is that was in the context of episodes where the stakes were really high, and it had Grogu not had that suit, things would have been really tough for him. So it served a purpose, but it also was funny. It wasn't there just for the sake of being funny or being silly, which I think Jack Black and Lizzo were just there for the sake of being Jack Black and Lizzo.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
The Jack Black Lizzo thing, that was casting gimmick. That was stunt casting. Grogu in the exoskeleton, yes, whimsical, but it gave the character a purpose and gave him the ability to keep up with the other characters.
Right.
In a situation where he couldn't, float around in the pram or Pelly wasn't there. You couldn't drop him off with Pelly or anything.
Yeah, it was practical.
He had to be in the thick of it. Then there were payoffs along the way because Grogu was able to contribute to the battle via this IG exoskeleton. So while its presentation was whimsical and it gave us a smile and everything, it still paid off in terms of how it was incorporated into the story. And we don't always get that with Star Wars. Farting Eopies, anyone? All right. One guy who is never whimsical is Moff Gideon. I think he has a sense of humor, but it's pretty damn twisted. And Giancarlo Esposito is the man behind the character, and he does just an amazing job. And so he presumably perished there in the season finale. And Giancarlo talks about that presumed death and the demise of Gideon. And I don't know if Giancarlo is optimistic that the character could ever make a return, but let's listen to what he has to say, and maybe we could read between the lines a little bit.
I know the inference was that always one day that Moff Gideon probably would meet his demise, and that wasn't a problem for me at all. It's just when and how tangible it is for an audience to see what may happen to him. I love this particular franchise because it's never clearly defined what really happens. Even for Luke Skywalker, when he goes over the edge, he's over the edge. You don't see that brutal demise or death, and there's always a possibility that the rise from the ashes is possible.
Yeah, they keep it just vague enough or not. I mean, we were talking about Darth Maul earlier. I mean, how much more explicit do you need to be cut in half? So much so that I firmly believe that Harrison Ford wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Han Solo was dead because he was impaled. He fell, God knows how long, and then the whole damn planet exploded. So, I mean, there's no way that Han Solo, of course, he did come back, but more as a vision or not a ghost, but a
memory,
a vision,
kid.
A memory. I'm a memory.
I'm a memory. Here I am. Wait, what's this going on? How is he appearing? Is he a Force ghost? What do you mean he's a memory? He's there talking to him. I see it. Hey, kid. That's another famous Lucasfilm just because sort of situation.
Because it's cool. Because it's
Why?
cool.
Just because. Yeah. Just because, we're Star Wars fans. We're a little more invested. We need an actual reason and purpose and motivation for these characters. We got to understand. So, Giancarlo certainly sounds like he's leaving the door open.
Yeah, he is.
What kind of information is he privileged to be aware of as far as season 4? Something tells me that Favreau keeps his actors in the loop to a certain degree, especially a guy like Giancarlo.
Favreau really gushes, and rightly so, in this documentary about working with Giancarlo. He says that he's a collaborative kind of actor, and that he asks all the right questions. That he has this curiosity, he wants to know, and that informs his performance. And you kind of get a sense that Giancarlo is not the kind of actor that just shows up, knows his lines, says his lines, and heads out. And you see clips of him asking questions. And so, right. I think this guy is really an actor's actor. And I would imagine that they probably want to keep him around as much as possible. Though we know that the door is now open and that perhaps the torch has been passed to Grand Admiral Thrawn as the big bad in the future of the Filoni verse.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's some compelling storytelling to be told should Thrawn return, and then all of a sudden Moff Gideon makes a surprise reappearance, and they have a little rivalry over the future of the dormant empire. I think there's some great storytelling situations that can be created out of that. And, of course, Moff Gideon was wearing that dark trooper armor that may be totally flame retardant. There was no body found. So I'm holding out hope. And a guy like Giancarlo, of course, he would be privileged to information about season 4. He's a highly in-demand actor, and his schedule must be pretty full. His dance card is full right now. So if they want to have him on the set, they have to make arrangements well in advance to make sure Moff Gideon will return. And Moff Gideon will return. So I think so. He's got that armor on. Flame retardant.
State of the art.
State of the art. So just to wrap things up, the conclusion of season 3, a lot of people were looking at that as a possible conclusion for the whole series altogether. And Favreau offers some insight into the way the season ended, and so does Dave Filoni. So here these two creators are talking about the conclusion of season 3.
Resolving the season the way we did, it does fulfill one of the Western tropes of the gunfighter moves on and things change. His presence has helped things take the next step, but that doesn't mean the gunfighter belongs there. Maybe they get a brief respite, but you know that new adventures are around the corner.
It might feel like the ending of one adventure, but it's always the beginning of another now.
Yeah, I love that. I'm trying to remember the name of the John Wayne film. Oh gosh, where he's hired to rescue the young girl that gets kidnapped.
Oh, True Grit.
True Grit. Yes.
Yeah.
And at the end of that film, it's a really kind of moving scene where he's successful. He brings the girl back. He reunites the girl with the mother, and the mother is hugging and holding, and Wayne walks off into the sunset. He's done his job. He's fulfilled his mission, and he leaves. And he could have potentially had a life there, but he didn't. And there's something about that. It's a kind of a romantic vision, I think, of manhood, of fulfilling your role in that sense, and there's something really romantic about it, and I love it, and I see that happening with Din Djarin here. Is that yes, there might be a brief respite, as Jon Favreau describes it, but we know that's not how he's wired. That's not what makes him tick. That's not what he's put into the galaxy far, far away for, is just to sit on the front porch and watch the child play at his feet. That's not going to be it for him.
Right. But they are applying that Western trope that Favreau referred to about, the gunslinger his job is done. So now it's time to relax and go fishing. But we know he'll be called out of retirement someday soon. And he'll be back in action, no doubt, probably in the Ahsoka series. I think something tells me there's going to be some Mandalorian crossover into the Ahsoka series, especially with the vision. Seeing the Purgles in Mandalorian season 3 is something that's going to be followed up on in the Ahsoka series as they hunt for Ezra.
Right? Yes,
has to be. Has to be.
Yeah,
and
the navigation skills that we've pointed out that they make a point to demonstrate with Grogu. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that could be looked at some foreshadowing, or at least laying down some foundation for what's going to happen next. And what's happening next is the Ahsoka series. I don't think Din nor Grogu will play a large role in that series, but they might appear in an episode. just like Ahsoka did in the
Right.
Mandalorian.
Right. Hey, you were on my show. I'm going to be in your show.
Yeah, and then it'll tease Mandalorian season 4. So the two characters will show up in the Ahsoka show, and they'll do whatever they need to do to propel that story forward, and then they'll give us a little taste as to what's next in store for the Mando and Grogu, and then they'll be gone, and the focus will go firmly back on Ahsoka for the rest of the series.
Right.
But Mandalorian and Grogu, it's money in the bank for Disney and Lucasfilm. These guys are not hanging up their hats.
No.
They're not going to just sit on the porch forever. They're going to be back in action before you know it. So strap in.
Well, definitely take a look if you haven't watched it yet. Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian Season 3. It's worth the watch. And you get so much behind the scenes stuff. There's a lot for you techies out there. You get to see, a lot of the animatronics and stuff that goes into the Yoda, the baby Yoda puppet, the Grogu puppet. And they talk about how it's improved. It really has improved. And there's a lot of great footage of him interacting, there on set with the guest stars like Lizzo and Jack Black. In addition, the costumes, if you're, obviously the cosplayers are just eating this stuff up because they get to see this stuff really up close and without all the filters and the magic tricks that go into making the series. So it's definitely worth watching. I would have liked a little bit more discussion about sort of some of the justification, maybe with some of the decisions that were being made storytelling wise. But it's promotional in nature. I'd love them to go back to the format of the season 1 where you got sort of the round table and all the directors there sitting and talking, and I could do without Kathleen Kennedy, but fine, have John and Dave there. But it's not the debut of the series like it was with season 1, so I can understand that they're not going to dedicate that much time, especially during these days of cutbacks.
Yeah, it plays out a little bit, maybe more like a Blu-ray extra, that you would
exactly.
Find with
yes,
it's not that long, deep, involved roundtable conversation that they were having in season 1, and that's okay. The thing that I took out of it mostly was that it's there's definitely many more voices at the table when it comes to The Mandalorian. It's no longer Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni show. There's much more collaboration going on with new voices at the table and things like that. We didn't really get any indication that Filoni was distracted by the Ahsoka series during the production of season 3, like some have said. We see plenty of shots of Filoni on the set, interacting with the actors, wearing Pittsburgh Penguins gear, and hanging out in the volume. So Dave was definitely present there for season 3, but I just think that there were many more cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. As promised, we do have a couple of news stories that we want to bring you up to speed on.
Oh, what about the deleted scene? With Moff
the
Gideon?
deleted
I did want to
scene.
mention it.
Yes.
This is just something that happened kind of brief in the special, and I noticed it right away because the thing that attracted me to this brief glimpse we got of a deleted scene was all of the stuff on the floor. And it was Moff Gideon
clone guts.
standing... I thought they were rose petals. I couldn't tell what this was on the floor, and so I freeze framed the scene, and I noticed that this is a deleted scene from the end of the Mandalorian season after Din had destroyed all of Moff Gideon's clones. Gideon goes into the lab and sort of assesses the damage and sees what had happened. Now, this was a scene that was shot, but not included in the series. So
we were really sad that we didn't see those clones slipping and sliding all over the deck there. You can see one of the cloned Gideons here on the floor.
Oh, there he is. Oh,
yeah. Look, there he is.
Who's the extra who got that gig?
I think it's Fake Mace. You heard of Fake Mace. This is fake. This is fake Gideon. There's only one of them, though. Every one of those pods had a clone in it, but you only see the one. And you can see the expression on his face as he walks in, and bewilderment there that his great experiment has been ruined.
Wow.
Yeah. I wish they would have completed this scene, but I can understand.
Yeah.
But.
Right. You got to keep the action moving and stuff, and it doesn't really move the story forward.
Right.
But it just gives us a character moment with Gideon when he realizes that the threat to his power is probably worth paying more attention to than he has thus far.
Right.
He just got a band of just walks in there and trashes the place. Crazy. But okay, so that's the final word on the Disney Gallery Mandalorian Season 3.
Check it out, for sure. All right, let's check in with the news here.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, as we alluded to earlier, Kathleen Kennedy has her hands full right now as she is out promoting Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, premiering in theaters this weekend as this podcast goes live. But anywhere Kathleen Kennedy goes, there's going to be microphones, there's going to be reporters, and they're going to be asking questions about Star Wars. And this is no exception. So this comes courtesy of GamesRadar.com. So Games Radar, this is primary source material. They actually had their microphones in front of Kathleen Kennedy asking her about the Rey movie and how the Rey movie might actually be connected to the James Mangold film that we talked about earlier, which might be, the origins of the Force, the first Jedi. So here's what Kathleen Kennedy says. First, talking about how Rey's Star Wars movie will break new ground. She says, I think what's always great about Star Wars is it's a big galaxy, and we're coming off what was a major war with the First Order. And now Rey has made a promise to Luke, and that's really the core of where we're going and what this story will be. And I think it offers just tremendous opportunity to introduce new characters and start with something fresh, because we culminated with what George was creating, and now we take all of that and move it on to the next chapter. So I'll stop there. There are a couple of things that jumped out at me. The promise to Luke. I mentioned, Jim, earlier that I recently went through the Luke and Rey scenes in The Rise of Skywalker, and I could find no such promise. This promise of creating a new Jedi Order that Kathleen Kennedy seems to be alluding to. Now, there is discussion. I mean, Luke does convince Rey that she needs to confront Palpatine, and she takes on that charge, just like Luke took on the charge of confronting Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi. Very similar in the setup there with Luke and Force Ghost Luke and Rey, and Force Ghost Ben and Luke in Return of the Jedi. But beyond that, I did not come out of there, with any promise that she was going to shepherd along the next generation of Jedi Knights. I scrubbed to the end. I'm like, did I miss something? On Tatooine, was there some sort of acknowledgement or anything? She certainly takes up the mantle, the name of Skywalker, but you could almost interpret, I feel, the end of that film as though she's going off to live in obscurity. She buries the sabers of Luke and Leia, and takes on the name of Skywalker and lives happily ever after in the Lars homestead. There's nothing in that film that indicates any kind of promise to Luke Skywalker.
No, she makes no pledge to him. There's nothing blatantly that happens in the dialogue that you could point at and say, this is a promise. Now, there's something that can be inferred just a little bit. And it's about Luke gifting Rey Leia's saber. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think that in that moment, he says to her that Leia put the saber down because she had a vision. By the time she became a Jedi and completed her training, her son would die. She sensed her son's death. So she turned over her lightsaber to Luke. And she said that she believed that her saber would be used again by someone who would finish her journey. Okay?
Okay.
So by Rey accepting that saber, she is promising Luke that she will essentially carry on the legacy of the Jedi as Leia was supposed to do. That's the best I can do. That is the best I can do.
You know, I'm going to applaud you because I think that what you're doing is commendable, and I think that most of the listeners out there are going to agree with you. I wish that Kathleen Kennedy read into the films with as much passion and fervor as you do. For her to just continue to spouting off this pledge, I think it just indicates for me a little bit how out of touch I feel like she is, in the same way that she really, I mean, she is definitely hanging a lantern on this idea of Rey's promise to Luke Skywalker, in the same way that she hung a lantern on the question of who is Luke Skywalker as the heart and the driving impetus behind the sequel films. She said that at the outset of the Force Awakens, before we even saw a frame of that film. This to me is the next who is Luke Skywalker, this promise. It's based on nothing. And I don't see it necessarily informing the content of the film, to be honest. It's just, I think, clumsy, ham-fisted talking points.
It does seem strange that she's very specific about Rey has made a promise to Luke, and that is the core of where we are going. So the whole core is based around something that really never happened in any of those films.
Right.
Rey never made any promise to Luke. She took on the name Skywalker. Maybe by doing that, it's inferred that by picking up the mantle of Skywalker, she will continue on by teaching future generations the way of the Force. Maybe but there is no tangible pledge or promise or oath that Rey ever takes.
No.
So where's Kathy pulling this out of? Whose ass is she pulling this out of? Her own? Maybe. Or maybe through the development of this next film. They clearly were working on it with the Lost writer, and now they're working on it with the other guy, Stephen.
Oh, yeah, the Peaky Blinders guy.
Stephen Knight.
And
so they've been developing something
Wright, but that's the comedian.
They've been developing something for a while, so maybe whatever this pledge is that Rey makes to Luke, this promise, maybe it's something that's actually slotted to be in the future film.
Right.
But then Kathy would be talking out of one side of her mouth while the other side of her mouth is telling reporters that there's not going to be any Force spirit Luke. And it's very confusing. Now, what is this promise, Kathy? Did you see the same movie we saw? I don't think she did. I don't even think she saw The Rise of Skywalker.
Because we culminated what George created. So we finished what George created, and now we take all of that and move it to the next chapter. That's what she's saying. Now, as for how Mangold's movie ties into this, so that film is going to take us back a long way on the Star Wars timeline to the very beginnings of the Force. Kennedy says that's come up a lot from the moment I stepped in and George brought me into the company. There's been a lot of interest in that. Of course, what she means by that, she means KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic. It's not that people are dying to see the origins of the Force. They wanted to see a KOTOR movie because up to that point, that had been one of the most successful video games in the history of Star Wars, and that timeline was very ripe and fertile for storytelling. So, but how does this tie into Mangold? She says it was something that Jim immediately sparked to, meaning this idea of the origins of the Force, the very first Force users. And she says, and I think it's a really nice compliment to what we're doing with the movie, with moving into the future, the Rey film, with Rey, and then understanding a bit more of where this all came from, because it will at the heart, it will be at the heart of creating New Jedi Order. So to get a real sense of where that might have begun with the dawn of the Jedi, that would be pretty cool. So what she's saying is, on the one hand, we're talking about the creation of a new Jedi Order, and on the other hand, we're going to see a film that's talking about the very origins of the Jedi, the very origins of the Force, the dawn of the Jedi. So there you go. In Kathleen's mind, the films are connected in that way.
Oh, yeah. And the promise to Luke is the core of what they're doing. What promise? Okay. but I'll tell you this. I would love to see some sort of cohesive tissue between the Rey film and the Mangold film. I'd like to see elements of the stories connecting somehow.
Sure.
You know,
that'd be great.
Things that happen in the Mangold film can maybe have some effect on the era that this Rey film is going to be in. It would be nice to see that kind of connective tissue, because through the 3 films of the sequel trilogy, those things were so disconnected. It's given a lot of fans big headaches. And so I want to see more cohesion with the storytelling is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be great, even though these are we're talking about, on one hand, the film that's the furthermost that we've experienced in Star Wars storytelling, the Rey film. It's going out post Episode 9, and then with the Mangold film, it's the lattermost, the earliest storytelling we've had in the Star Wars universe. So for those to actually sort of come together in a tangible way, not just in a Kathleen Kennedy PR kind of way, but in a tangible way that we as the film goers can see, would be, I think, really great. I think it would be great.
Like the seed could be planted for a great threat to Rey that begins in the Mangold film.
Right.
We could see some sort of, ancient threats originating in the Mangold film, but not really coming to fruition until the Rey film. And I think that would be a great way to do it, as opposed to some world between worlds portal that will connect the two,
Sure.
And
sure.
doing something like that. I let's see some concepts affect each other.
The other thing too that is, we'll wait and see, but she says, because it will be at the heart of creating the new Jedi Order. What is the new Jedi Order? I mean, this is a new Jedi Order that is in the image and likeness of Kathleen Kennedy and her team. And I hope they can do better than what they did with the High Republic. And you had, literally a Jedi that was a rock, geode. I mean, that was a new order of Jedi. I mean, it's going to be really, really sad if that is the type of characters that they're going to be creating for this new order. I hope that the past does not imitate, or that the future does not imitate the past with that, because that's weak stuff.
Yikes.
All right, one more story.
I want to be optimistic. Yeah, let's do one more story.
One more story before we wrap things up, because this is kind of fun. So I don't play this game. I Galaxy of Heroes. It's a mobile game for iOS and Android users. It looks kind of cool. It seems to be popular. It's been going on since 2015. So it's in its, going into its 9th year. Galaxy of Heroes, mobile collectible RPG game. But what's interesting is that there was this promotional image, Jim, that hit the web, and it shows the very first official version from Lucasfilm of Captain Rex with the face of Tamora Morrison. And look at him there. So people are there have been rumors that Tem's Captain Rex would appear in the Ahsoka series. Could this actually be the very first glimpse that we are getting of, and is this confirmation that Tem is going to be playing yet another character in live action Star Wars as Captain Rex. So it could just be for the video game, but many are speculating that there might be more to this, and this is actually a glimpse of what we might see in Ahsoka Season 1.
Well, it makes all the sense in the world for him to actually be in Ahsoka. Assuming Captain Rex survives until the Mandalorian era. You got to remember this guy is aging in double time. So,
Yeah,
but
right.
they can figure out a way to retcon that somehow or something. I heard somebody said that Dave Filoni was heard at a convention saying that the clones age at double time until they're about 20. And then it kind of slows down. But that's every source that I have been aware of since 2002 and Attack of the Clones have always told us that these guys are aging at double time. And
Accelerated aging tapers off. It wears out after a while.
So, but you never know. There might be some kind of retcon involved in that whole idea. But Rex certainly does look pretty old in Rebels.
Yeah.
And so it looks like he's been aging at double time because Clone Wars was only just a few years prior to the events of Star Wars Rebels. Like 10 or 15 years tops. So I don't know. I think Rex is aging at double time.
Would you like to see Rex? And do you think we'll see Rex in Season 1 of Ahsoka in the form of Tem
I
Morrison?
think the possibility is very strong. I think it is very strong. And seeing an image like this, even though it is an illustration for a video game, it does kind of prepare us for a live action Tem Morrison Captain Rex. And so why not? We'll see. But then again, it will be asking the question, well, where was Captain Rex then during the events of the original trilogy?
On Endor.
That's the other thing, too, is he the biker scout rebel trooper?
Right.
There's a lot of confusion. I think that's been largely debunked. I
think Filoni debunked it, didn't he, at one point? I feel like he may have, but anyway.
But that's the story of Captain Rex. Tem Morrison, he said the phone didn't ring for Mandalorian Season 3.
Right.
But he never said anything about the Ahsoka series. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him in it. And we're just a couple months away till Ahsoka. Oh, something that I had heard was that there's going to be a Lucasfilm presentation at a convention this weekend. And some fresh Ahsoka footage will be screened.
No kidding. What convention is this? Do you know?
It's a New Orleans convention of some sort. I don't know if it's an industry event or if it's a fan convention. I really don't know. I just got the slightest of briefing on this before we started the show. But so they say there'll be some fresh footage dropping this week.
Keep your eyes out. Maybe some fresh footage. Obviously, you want to be following Star Wars, the official Star Wars YouTube channel. That's usually where that stuff drops. So if there's a live presentation and it's going to go wide, they get it out on the YouTube channel very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But above all, you want to be following Rebel Force Radio. That's really where you're going to get the breaking news because we're always
except next week.
That's right.
Chewie, get us out of here!
It's the 4th of July, man. Come on. We got to take some time off. Wow, this has been a lot of fun. Great stuff. Mandalorian Season 3 featured in Disney Gallery. Check it out. It's on Disney+. See what you think. How does it stack up to some of the previous Disney Galleries that we've seen? I think that Disney Gallery title, they've only been using it for Star Wars stuff. I don't think they've done Disney Galleries for the other franchises.
It's such a weird title.
Disney Empire. Yeah, it is kind of weird.
It just says nothing.
It doesn't say really
Disney
much.
Gallery, The Mandalorian Season 3. It says nothing.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen some of the previous ones, they're great, especially the season 1, multiple episodes, roundtable discussions with the creators. Thanks for hanging with us. As we said earlier, we're not going to be here next week, so it's a great time to go over to Rebel Force Radio on Patreon and listen to some of those exclusive podcasts that you can't find anywhere else. Good time to drop in $1 and you're listening at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. And, throughout this episode, we were looking at some stills and some things from the Disney Gallery. So that's a great way to make sure that you're watching this podcast in addition to listening to it. When you join at the All Access tier, and you get the full show video. Also, speaking of video, please watch us over on YouTube. Like us, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff over at the Rebel Force Radio YouTube channel at youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. There's just so much content over there. And as you go into a holiday weekend, you got some time off, and you're just chilling out. Maybe you're on a boat somewhere. Fire up the Rebel Force Radio YouTube channel and check out some of the things we have to offer there, as well as our other social media channels. We're on all of the big socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Rebel Force Radio or at RFR Rebel Force. The official website for all things and everything Rebel Force Radio, of course, found at rebelforceradio.com. No new show next week. Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day to all of our fellow Americans. We'll be back the following week, July 14th, with more Rebel Force Radio. But until then, for RFR, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
Dude, his name is Bombardier. It's got bomb in the name.